Hey everybody, hello and welcome to Internet 2030, the first of CoinDesk's first two conversations about the future of the internet. Today we're going to be talking with Filecoin and also with ConsenSys a little bit later on. For those who don't remember, Filecoin was a giant initial coin offering that came out of Protocol Labs, which is meant to change the way that data is stored around the internet, truly transform the way that we store the information the internet needs. We've been waiting since 2017 for the protocol to come forth, and we are getting very close. So today we're here with the founder of Filecoin, Juan Benet, who we've talked with before, and also this time we're here with Colin Evran, who's also with the Filecoin team, a part of the business development team working on the Filecoin ecosystem. So welcome to you both. Great to talk to you again.
Great to see you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brady.
Hey, how's it going? Good to meet you, Colin.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah. So let's just start off on the basics here. Why does the internet need to be reinvented, and why is storage the place to start?
So we live in a world where most of our human activity is assisted by computers. Every year, more and more of our interactions happen entirely online or assisted by computers in some way. So most of our communications, most of our conversations are going through digital media. These platforms, the ones that are moving around all our information and storing it, have a bunch of different flaws. So one big one is that most of the data, though encrypted from your computer to their computers, it's usually stored in the clear, and that is not protecting user privacy in the long term. You can imagine a situation where anybody can go through that data in the future. Things are fine now in a lot of countries, but that's not always the case. History has shown that sometimes bad parties take power, and then they could go over and have corporations like this turn over huge troves of data, and they could go and rifle through that. So that's like a pretty dangerous place to be. The other part of it is that the current centralization of the market causes this very difficult situation where there's basically a few centralized monopolies that control most of the digital infrastructure that we use. Most of the applications and platforms go through those monopolies, and that makes it.
Who are those monopolies, Juan? Who are we talking about here?
I mean, so it's basically like the large cloud companies, right? So it's Amazon, Google, to some extent Apple, and a few others.
Some tiny companies you're taking on there, some just really little guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's this world where networks can actually fight against large centralized players, right? So this is not us taking on these groups. It's either it's really creating a marketplace and a network where all of us together can actually compete, right? Rather than taking on one-on-one fights with a giant, let's all of us band together and actually create some like better infrastructure with better rights.
Right. Okay, so great. So yeah, and just to sort of put some flesh on what you were saying there, just a good example. Let me know if I have this right, but this idea of data not being stored at rest, right? Like I happen to use Proton Mail for my personal email, which is an encrypted email provider. So that means if they actually did manage to break into Proton Mail, which is unlikely, they would just be like, what's all this gobbledygook? But that's not the truth for most data storage providers, right? If you can get in the front door, you can find everything.
That's right. Revenue model as well. So both the cloud, the way that clouds work today, and the advertising model, business model, both of those kind of promote a lot of user data being stored entirely in the clear, so that companies can go through and look at it and understand how to advertise better and so on, or just simply for convenience. In many cases, like the cloud computing infrastructure was developed this way, and users haven't really requested this as a major change, and so we're in this really vulnerable position where just tons of data is entirely in the clear, and we really need to move to a world where we have user protecting encryption, where what you are doing, what you're saying online, and what you're talking to your friends about and your family members and so on, isn't being tracked and collected, so that in the future it might come back and hurt you.
Yeah, right. And so why is it important to fix this for us to start with data storage? I mean, you gave us one reason, sort of it's encrypted at rest. So that's a good one. What else? Because I mean, one thing people often say on this topic is the one thing that keeps getting cheaper and cheaper on the internet is storing data. So why is this a good business? Yeah,
exactly, and that's one of the reasons why it makes sense to distribute it this way, and we can actually have it's possible for a new network and a new entrant to come into the picture, because the volumes of data are growing tremendously every year. So it's really, the future is anybody's game in a sense. And the really key reason to start there and to really help. So kind of the world of Bitcoin and Ethereum and blockchains in general have helped us gain a much better financial infrastructure, where we now have certain systems that at least promote the ability to transfer money and transfer value and so on with certain kinds of rights. We need to move that kind of user-centered and user-protecting set of rights to data storage. And the reason to start there is most of the information that we're transmitting and distributing and so on, all the applications are stored somewhere, right? So all of our conversations, all of the chat streams, video, all of that kind of stuff is stored somewhere. Somebody has to store it and transmit it to other people. We want to just convert all of that into a properly decentralized market that anybody can participate in.
So Colin, I'm going to turn to you in just 1 second here, but just want to say for folks who just saw this on the CoinDesk front page or wherever you found it, just tuned in, we're here at Internet 2030. It's our CoinDesk Live series talking about the future of the web. If folks have questions they want to ask, probably the best way to do that is hashtag Internet 2030 on Twitter. We've got folks watching that. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, I think there's a little chat function on the side. There's folks watching that there. So just throw those questions in. We're happy to ask them. So yeah, Colin, so Juan's given us the theoretical background. You're kind of working with people who want to use this. Could you tell us a little bit about those folks?
Of course, of course. So it's a two-sided network. So on one side, you have data folks who provide data storage. For example, on the incentivized testnet that we've launched today called Space Race, there are over 350 small businesses and individuals that provide storage to the network, and they've actually proven that they have over 230 petabytes of data on the network today, across 6 continents, over 30 countries, et cetera. And on the other side are folks looking to store data. And the way I think about that is today only 7% of the world's data that gets generated actually gets stored. And that ratio is decreasing over time because there's so much more information being produced and not enough places to store it. And the reason is not because we don't want to store that data or it's not useful or important. It's because it's too expensive to store today. You have to ask a company or central authority for permission, or the storage doesn't have the properties you're looking for. It's not verifiable, it's not decentralized, it's not encrypted. So our focus is really to open up a way for a user to not necessarily move away from the existing cloud storage providers, but focus on that 97% of data that doesn't currently get stored, gets completely thrown away, and store that in an efficiently priced and decentralized way.
Okay. And you guys, did the space race just end yesterday? Did it end, or is it still going?
So it ended. Space Race 1 ended yesterday, but over the last few weeks, we got so much feedback on wanting to have a second space race, so that we ended up continuing having a second phase to Space Race, and that started as the first one ended. The second one started, and that's going on now. Okay.
Cool. And so, I know that the racers are all over the world, but as I understand it, most of the interest, I mean, like I don't know if it's the most, a lion's share, a significant portion of the interest has been in Asia. I think particularly China. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just curious as to why that is. Our reporter in Hong Kong has been doing a lot of work on this because he's seen all this interest there. Why is it in particular in Asia people want to get involved with Filecoin early?
So big part of it is just China has a large amount of communities that are very focused on mining cryptocurrencies in general. So most cryptocurrencies that have any kind of large, strong mining component will have a large following there. So that's one reason. The second reason is IPFS itself got a very large following in China as a platform and as a technology. And this kind of came together with Ethereum. So there's a lot of Ethereum adoption and Ethereum interest, and that brought in IPFS as well. And then from there, IPFS then translated into Filecoin interest for a lot of participants. So that's one big reason.
IPFS is the Interplanetary File System. It's an open source approach to address data by content, not location, right?
That's perfect. That's like the most succinct way that I've heard it described yet. So that's fantastic. Part of the reasoning there is it's shifting how the web works, where instead of right now when you visit a website, you are going to that server, you're going to that address, and you're going to computers controlled by that set of parties. We want to move publishing into a world where you want to address all of the information based on what the information is, and you can have information flowing through the network without having to require you to connect to those specific computers in the future. So really making it peer-to-peer and more like, say, BitTorrent or Bitcoin, and how that information flow happens, but do that for all websites. And so IPFS is a project to achieve that. Now, the one big hole in IPFS is just how are you going to incentivize the distribution of data, how you're going to hire people to actually store it, and so on. And that's where Filecoin comes in. IPFS and Filecoin are complementary protocols where people can use IPFS on its own to address and move around data. And if they want to hire people to store it, they could go a normal, traditional, centralized route. They could store it themselves, or they could use platforms like Filecoin, where they're using cryptocurrency to hire parties to store their data.
And I've been following your work for a long time, Juan, so I've heard you talk about this before, and I know one of the things you say that IPFS helps to address is like this idea of link rot. So if anyone's ever like looked at an old blog and followed a link, a lot of times those links just don't go anywhere anymore. But I was thinking about this morning, and so Filecoin can solve that with content addressing. Like even if it's not in that location anymore, it might be somewhere else. But the problem is, don't you still kind of have the same problem? Because if whoever it is put that data there and is no longer paying for it to be in the world, then it could still just evaporate the same way, right?
But anyone can pay for it, so it doesn't have to be just the original author. It just has to be anybody who has an interest in it, right? And so with IPFS, what you move the data distribution model into one where if you're interested in the data staying around for your, either because you want to use it or because you care about preserving it, or you want to pay, or you're getting paid to preserve it, then you can keep it around, right? And so with IPFS, you either look at a website and copy it and now have it for the future, or you're getting paid to distribute it by anybody. It doesn't have to be the original publisher. And like that shifts the model where you can go and create information, publish it to the world, make it part of the public record, make it something that other people should be looking at and sharing and so on. And even if you go away, that information can carry on and can continue being read. So imagine if books worked the way that websites do today, where like only if the original author was still around and paying for the book to exist. And the moment that author goes away, like all the books in the world just vanish. Like that's how websites work today, and it's super crazy. We want to move the web more to how books actually work, where as soon as the information is made and published, and it's made part of the public record, then anybody can keep it around and can disseminate it.
So this could mean that like the Internet Archive, right, which I assume a lot of people out there watching are familiar with, they use the Wayback Machine to find stuff that's lost. They wouldn't even need, if you use that, you have to go to a new location. You got to know, oh, it's gone there. What was the URL? Go put it in the Internet Archive. But the Internet Archive could just come along and say, we're just going to pay for an additional copy of the exact same address. So if you click it and the original one's gone, you can just, right?
Yeah, exactly right. So they could just grab all of these extra copies and either pay for them to be backed up or back them up themselves. So one of the possibilities here is that with the Internet Archive backing these things up, the Internet Archive itself could start earning revenue as well, just by providing this useful service to the world.
Okay. Well, since you brought that up, let's talk about earning revenue. So what are the different ways in which people can mine, so to speak, on Filecoin? And what's that look like? What's it take to get involved, et cetera, et cetera?
So there's two parts. There's storage mining and retrieval mining. Storage mining follows the kind of store information and keep it around for a long time part of the model. So this is like standard data storage. Think of the data going into hard disks and being stored in the long term. The retrieval mining is more about content delivery and making distributing the data that is requested a lot around the world so that it can be retrieved very quickly. And so you have a kind of this platform with multiple tiers where in the bottom, in the storage mining layer, you can back things up for the very long time. And it can be stored in a few, say, geographies where you want a few copies around the world for redundancy and so on. But then if you want it to be distributed extremely quickly and served to users very efficiently and so on, then the retrieval mining layer comes in, where that starts functioning more like a CDN. And so this allows the market to look at, to really find exactly the right spot to be. We want to make the systems not be kind of human and centrally planned, human design and centrally planned, but rather use markets to find exactly the right spots of distribution for the data, and enable anybody to come in who says, hey, I can actually make the system much more efficient by putting hardware in this particular part, whether it's long-term storage hardware or kind of fast machines that can distribute data quickly in specific regions, and really enable them to come in and.
Cool. And this content delivery network, the CDN thing that you've talked about, that's an existing business model that also is very important to the existing web right now, right?
Yeah, it's critical. So lots of great internet companies have been built around the content delivery part of the picture. So companies like Cloudflare and Fastly and others, where they focus entirely on the problem of how do you distribute content to the people that are trying to view it as fast as possible, and you make load times on the web really fast. We want to move all of this world not in terms of kind of we want to create a structure where it's a marketplace like Airbnb. So imagine like the Airbnb model where there's a lot of hotels that are maybe established chains and very large companies and so on around the world, and then you have a vast amount of potential supply of rooms and so on all over the world in specific settings and so on. A marketplace comes in to enable that additional supply to come into the market, and so that's what we want to do with Filecoin. We want to enable not just the current existing CDNs and so on to participate, but we want to enable all kinds of other machines around the world to compete in this market.
Cool. And I was talking to Wolfie, one of our reporters who follows largely mining in China, and he had said to me that one of the things he was hearing in China is you guys just did this document that came out, sort of the engineering the Filecoin economy. And I just did an explainer on it on CoinDesk, which I feel like I explained things without explaining it, but whatever. But one of the things he was saying is he's hearing a little bit that some folks in China are a bit daunted by the amount of collateral that's required. So can you talk a little bit about the upfront costs for China for any miner to participate, and kind of why that makes sense for them, and why it's, I guess, as high as it is?
Yeah, so it's a great question. The collaterals in Filecoin come in because the protocol needs a way of verifying that parties are behaving correctly. So, for example, if you as a miner promise the network and promise a user that you're going to store their data in the long term, and then you don't, then that would be like a really terrible storage network, right? And so we need to align the incentives so that parties that commit to store data for users are indeed going to do so. And if they're going to not do that anymore, there needs to be a significant negative consequence. So the collaterals are there across the protocol to ensure good behaviors in various different parts. So some parts of that is just the long-term storage, other parts is maintaining consensus, and so on. The large collateral requirements are matched. So the reason collateral ended up being pretty large is that collateral is matched to the earnings, and so it's a proportion of the earnings. So the collateral is really a fraction of what people might end up earning by storing this data in the long term.
Like what
and it
kind
has
of
to be
fraction?
tied to.
Are we talking 5%? Are we talking 50%? Are we talking 70%?
I don't recall the exact percentage right now, but it has to be some large percentage to ensure that you can get into a situation where if you can make more money than the collaterals, you can start playing games where if the protocol isn't checking in a specific point in time, you can cheat the network and end up making way more money before the network catches you. And so the pain has to be the penalties have to be just high enough to make sure that those incentives work out in the long run. And so there's like a high degree of careful tuning that has to go into this. Different mechanisms can exist over time that potentially reduce these fees. One of the most active areas of protocol design that we are doing right now and we foresee will go deep into for the next many years is exactly tuning economic parameters like these over time based on data and how things are actually functioning. So one of the things where we learned from the space race as an example is one particular fee structure is especially punitive, and we need to reduce that pain point dramatically. And so that's one of the learnings over the last 3 weeks is, hey, this particular mechanism is over punishing in this period, and so shifting that fee structure so that it's way less painful and it costs way less at the beginning, and only if kind of continued misbehavior is shown, then actually getting into like the higher numbers. That's one of the things that we're using things like space race to figure out, and then adjust the protocol. So it's kind of like this evolution of you make a model, you test the model, you can analytically try to find like the right solution. You can simulate a lot of it and get into a really good plan. But then you actually have to test it with a lot of people and test it in a setting as close to the real incentives world as you can, and then see how it actually behaves. And so, you know, I guess one piece of good news is like, really, we only found like this one particular one that was particularly painful. The rest that are actually fairly good. And so now we just have to adjust this one, and then we should be in a much better spot.
Yeah, that's all. It's all really thoughtful and interesting. I don't really know why you're worried about it. This is crypto. No one would ever pull a hustle just to make money. But you know, an ounce of precaution, I guess, is worth a pound of cure. So, Colin, maybe you could tell us a little bit about folks who want this kind of solution. Like, are there companies out there? We know there's some decentralized web companies, you know, who are trying to build markets right now and things like sharing music and etc. Are there companies who are eager to get going with Filecoin when it launches?
Definitely. So we have over 80 kind of larger credible organizations building on testnet today, and over 150 kind of hacker projects that have evolved through some of the various hackathons that ETH Global and Spark University have put on. And that completely spans the gamut. So it's kind of like, think of it like Dropbox style apps. Fleek's one of my favorites. They have an application called Space that's privacy focused, encrypted, a peer-to-peer replacement for kind of Dropbox or Google Drive built on top of IPFS and Filecoin. You have video streaming apps that are built on LivePeer and Filecoin, which are amazing. And then you have like really large data sets that are looking to be archived in a certain way. So one of my favorites there is the Shoah Foundation, which is a database of Holocaust-related video testimony from 55,000 survivors across nine genocides, 9 petabytes of recordings, and a property that they really appreciate about Filecoin is that it's actually verifiable. You can trace that data back to the actual person, you know, who created that video. And so it really spans the gamut of different use cases. And I'm sure when Joe comes on, he'll talk a little bit about the DeFi use cases as well.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so we'll we're gonna bring on Joe Lubin from ConsenSys soon. Just a reminder to everyone, if you have questions and you're watching on Twitter, hashtag Internet 2030. If you're on YouTube, just use the chat. So you mentioned privacy, Colin. One thing that either one of you can answer that I was curious about. You know, one of the things that's so cool about the DeFi world in Ethereum is that you know, I can borrow money and no one knows who I am. It's wild. Am I going to have to KYC to, you know, store some files on Filecoin, or is it going to be permissionless in a similar way?
It's permissionless. So any party can create an identity on the network the same way that you do in Bitcoin or Ethereum, and you can then from there you can store data. There is a part of the protocol where going through for larger scale users, like users that want to store many petabytes and potentially exabytes of data, we want to create a structure where those parties can get a significant kind of like cost reduction over time once you get to these high volumes. And so that part has a kind of